Good morning, everyone. It's Lee Henson, President and Founder of AgileDad, and it's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. Without any further ado, let's get started. One of the questions that I frequently get asked is, how do I properly run a retrospective? There are problems that people commonly run into, and people want to know how to overcome these issues. So my dear friend Mike Cohn, not too long ago, he wrote an article called Overcoming Four Common Problems with Retrospectives. So I thought I'd highlight some of these, talk about them. And the truth is, if you expect all retrospectives to be perfect, you're wrong. Most retrospectives aren't perfect. In fact, anytime you're talking about improvement or anytime you're talking about things that you can do to help everyone on the team get more on the same page, you're going to struggle to get your retrospective just right. Different teams have different cultures. They have different inroads. So it's hard, but I want to talk about the top four problems. So let's talk about those. Let's go straight into it. Problem number one, people aren't being honest or trustworthy. Okay. So one of the most common complaints I hear is that people fail to bring up the real issues or admit that they have a problem that they're trying to solve. If people aren't going to be honest, then it's not really a retrospective, period. Let's just get it out there. So there are important steps that you need to take in order to create a safe environment. If you have the wrong people in a room, if you have people in a room who make people feel uncomfortable, the elephant in the room, or if you have people who are angry with people who are external but can't voice that opinion because they're afraid of retribution or whatever the case may be, you need to allow for people to be emotional, but at the same time not be disrespectful. So the easiest example that I use here is I've seen fisticuffs in a retrospective. I've seen people swear. I've seen people try to throw a monitor through a window. It's ridiculous, right? We need to keep it civil, but at the same time, high energy is allowed. So while I don't condone swearing in a retrospective, I condone modeling a behavior that you expect others to behave as. So if you come in real low energy and not excited about the retrospective, people aren't going to want to participate. So make sure that you're being participative yourself and that you're modeling a behavior that you want people to follow. And if there is any criticism, which there should be, we need to make sure the criticism is done in a constructive way. We never want to feel like anyone's being bullied or picked on. And then finally, it's between the team and the scrum master to make sure that they follow through on commitments and admit if they made a mistake that prevented them from meeting a commitment. So there's lots of meat here, but you need to make sure you have a clear understanding of what you're committing to do when you leave the room and how you're going to make things better, not just that you are going to make things better, and then follow up on those things. Make sure those things happen. Number two, retrospectives are boring. For me, I, like Mike, love listening to music. I enjoy most genres and enjoy both live and recorded music. But like I said, there's something special about live music. There's something that just captures you and brings you in. And he goes on to tell a story about getting tickets to shows and seeing things, getting unsold tickets the night of a performance, those type of things. And what I can tell you is, if you think about a retrospective like a concert, it's, a good concert is one that's live and interesting and impromptu and engaging. If it's planned all the way down to the smallest detail, typically it's not going to be a good show. And I think that might be why so many people have problems with the halftime show from this year's Super Bowl. It was choreographed down to the tiniest detail. And while the artist is incredibly artistic and had great capabilities, he just didn't take advantage of those capabilities. And it led down a path where everything just looks so structured. Now, don't get me wrong. It's fine to have a few standards or guidelines, but you don't want to have a specific set of motions that everyone goes through: stand, sit, kneel. You want to make sure it's not choreographed. You want to make sure the retrospective provides values and answers challenging questions. Speaking of questions, if you want to keep it interesting, change the questions. There's no rule that says you have to ask the same questions every single time. There are all kinds of games like the sailboat game or the 4-quadrant game. There's games on Tasty Cupcakes. There's games on innovation games. There's just lots of really cool things that you can do that will help you energize or reinvigorate your retrospective. There's retro in a box. There's tons of things you can do. It's just a matter of you figuring out what's going to work best for your group and for your organization, right? Because it's not a one size fits all thing. It's based on usually the seniority level of people who you're doing it with, how long they've been doing retrospectives for, and what's going to work for them. So there's lots of great kits available and things that you can do to help you maximize and get best benefit out of your retrospective. The other is not only change the questions, but change how the questions are asked. A lot of people use the start, stop, continue format. We want to start doing these things, stop doing these things, continue doing these things. And that's a great way to do it instead of just asking questions directly. What went well, what didn't go well, right? Problem number 3, retrospectives aren't effective. That begs the question, why isn't the retrospective effective? And I think that, there are enough agile teams out there that can tell you that retrospectives are incredibly effective if they're used correctly. If you feel like it's not effective, grab a mirror. There's the problem's probably somewhere internal, right? There's something that you're not doing. I don't think there's a lot of room to argue that. Just like Mike says, I agree with him here. So even the world's best team can have a bad retrospective. Just throwing it out there. So it doesn't matter, if they have trophies and magazine covers and they've been recognized by every intellectual capital in the world saying that they're the best at what they do, there's still room for improvement. And I think that we need to look for that room for improvement. Most realistic examples, a team spends anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour in a retrospective. And they want to learn what they can do better. And they really are invested in figuring out what they could do to give back, to pay back. And I think that you need to set realistic goals. If your team hates retrospectives, that means you're doing something wrong and you're not being realistic. Sometimes you're putting things out there that are so far-fetched that there's no way the team could ever reach them. Let the team formulate their goals and work with the team to find things that they can actually achieve to make it more interesting and to make it more consumable. And finally, retrospectives just don't work for distributed teams. Oh my goodness. Now with COVID and with online teams, I hear this all the time. The truth is, everything's harder with a distributed team, period. There, I said it. If you got people in India and folks in the US and folks in China and folks in Australia, you're going to have some challenges. You're going to have some things, some time zone issues, some things that are there. But I think one thing that's important to know is never try to do a retrospective over a conference call. You need to use some type of visual learning device. So you need to have people with video on. It should be mandatory in a retrospective to have video on. You can use collaborative editing tools to make things easier. A lot of people use Miro or Mural to facilitate these retrospectives and to kind of visualize and work with people and let people, draw out how they're feeling. I know it sounds crazy, but it works. And keep the meeting short. Long meetings are never fun, right? Long meetings are never fun meetings, period. So think about it. Think about how painful it would be to do the long meeting in person and then multiply that times a factor of 10. That's how much more painful it is to do a long meeting remote. So I think that you have to keep the retrospectives fun and interesting and find ways to get people engaged. Ask questions that you normally wouldn't ask about people's favorite flavor ice cream, or if someone always brings food in, find a way to get snacks delivered during a retrospective to people that are in other cities and let them, get something at their home or wherever they are at their office. That's just something that's cool for them. It's fun to do that. I worked with one company and they would always have a different beer at every retrospective. And we found a way to have beer delivered to the people. And, it just meant something to them, to that team, that we thought outside the box and found a way to get it to them. Now, I'm not condoning, sending alcohol to people. But what I am saying is find something that everyone can gel around. Find something that everyone can come to terms with and feel like it's helping them. And if you solve those 4 problems, if you solve the remote retrospective dilemma and get people to understand why it's important and make it fun, improve the payback, make sure you're doing what you need to do, make sure that, you're following through on the commitments and the things that you said you're going to change. And then finally, make sure that everyone there feels like they're in a safe environment so they can be honest and trustworthy. If you're doing those 4 things, your retrospectives are going to completely spin back into control and they're going to make sense. And it's going to be a time that the team enjoys spending together. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Daily Stand-Up. As always, we encourage you to visit agiledad.com. And if you have a topic you'd like for us to cover, email us, learnmore@agiledad.com, kim@agiledad.com. We'd love to get those topics slated up for a future episode. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.